Michael Savage.
We are not one caucus or the other in this House today, but we speak for each other in saying that we send our thoughts and prayers to our colleague, Steve Scalise. Personally, we have our Italian-American connection, so as soon as I heard his name, I was filled with concern, as I would be for anyone here, but we have that special connection, so our hopes and prayers, and I said to the Speaker, I'll be asking you
the Italian connection? What is this? This is the leader of the Democrat Party in the middle of a tragedy like this. She goes off on a tangent. She sees the word Scalise already. It's her blood brother. This is not laughable. We have senile old people running the country. And then we have crazy people who are listening to senile old people who are telling them to go out there and be disruptors. This woman, Nancy Pelosi, 3 years ago gave a commencement speech at my alma mater, UC Berkeley, where she said, go out and be a disruptor. And the crowd cheered, you're all disruptors. Well, didn't they just disrupt Berkeley a few times and burn things to the ground, almost destroy Sproul Hall? Do you think that there is no connection between the loose rhetoric of Pelosi and of Bernie Sanders and of Barack Obama for 8 straight years and the others and what is happening in this country today? I do. So I've talked about what has happened. I asked you who's responsible, but I haven't talked about what is going to happen. This is the most difficult part of today's coverage because I'm not a crystal ball reader and I'm not a guru. But I'm a student of history. So if you study the arc of we'll call it a socialist revolution that's occurring in the world and in America. Let's study the arc of that for a moment. The prognosis from Dr. Savage, I'm afraid, is not very good. This does not get healed overnight. The patient will get much sicker and may never recover. This patient called the United States of America, no matter what you think and no matter what you wish, because the forces of evil are so powerful, the forces of evil are so wealthy, and the forces of worldwide socialism are so everywhere, I'm afraid that this patient called America is down for a long period of time, and whether she will ever recover is a good question. I want you to look at some other nations that once had a thriving middle class, Nancy Pelosi. But because of people with sick mouths like yours, sick mentalities like yours, a rich woman, one of the richest women in the world, telling people to go out and be violent and be disruptors, never shutting your mouth for 1 second, inciting idiots to commit violence at Berkeley and everywhere you go. Because of people like you, Pelosi, and people like Sanders, and people like Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, Tim Kaine, just add to the list. Feel free, fill it in. The once thriving middle class in that beautiful nation of Venezuela in South America started to flee South America. I happen to know a lot about the history of Chavez's rise, and I'll tell you why. Chavez had an election that he stole the votes. I happen to know of a New York lawyer, very prominent liberal First Amendment lawyer, one of the most important men on the planet, well loved in New York liberal circles for his activism, his social activism, and his decency and his goodness, through and through red. Rich man, like all of the Reds in New York. Rich man, very rich. No difference between the East Coast and the West Coast with that. Just look at who lives on Pacific Heights in San Francisco and follow the money and then follow the rhetoric, and you'll see where it leads. Anyway, this guy went over there to South America, to Venezuela, after the election, Venezuela, and he was part of the contingent, don't you know, of outside monitors who determined whether or not the election was fair and square. And, of course, it was not. It was stolen by Chavez's socialist goons. But this New York civil libertarian koshered the stamp. He gave it the stamp of approval. And the rest is history. Now you got people, much of the middle class soon left the country. They couldn't live there. They were being taxed to death. First, they were verbally assaulted by the Pelosi's and the Sanders of their country, who were rich themselves and said, oh, screw the rich. They're the evil ones. And they started to get attacked in the streets. Their businesses were being attacked. And then they started to flee that country. They came to Miami, a lot of them. of course, other places in America. But they fled South America because of what was going on there then, which is what is going on here now. And so the middle class dissolved. It disappeared in Venezuela. And then, of course, what happened is predictable. They were the most productive class in that country, as is the middle class in this country, whether you're poor and working or very rich and investing, you're part of the middle class, by the way. You're not in the category of the robber barons. The robber barons, in my opinion, would be those conducting monopolistic business practices such as Google, Facebook, Amazon. You could name them. You know who they are. They're way beyond the point of no return with regard to practicing unfair business practices because they're monopolies. They are not the middle class. They're not even the rich. They are the robber barons of our time. They are the Rockefellers, the J.P. Morgans, the Guggenheims. They are the ones who the government once targeted for monopolistic practices. And as a populist myself, by the way, I know the history of Teddy Roosevelt. But I don't want to go into that right now. I just want to continue on my arc of where this goes. Make believe you're following me. You follow where I'm going because I don't forget where I'm going. I hope you don't either. As a result of the attacks upon the middle class fled. Once the middle class fled, the society collapsed because the poor are not productive. The poor are recipients of the largesse of the middle class, as they are in this country, the bums, the wastrels, all the Bernie supporters, in other words. They live off the taxation put upon the middle class. You know and I know Mark Zuckerberg doesn't pay the amount of taxes that you pay. You know and I know that Warren Buffett doesn't pay the amount of taxes I pay. He said so himself. He boasted about it. He said his secretary pays more. These guys are so clever that they pay less tax than their secretary does. And the government under Obama did nothing about it. I thought the Trump administration would go after these robber barons. But thus far, he has been unable to because of the vermin on the left in the media who don't give the man a breathing space. Now you understand the rest of that story. Why do you think they're attacking Trump with such vile hatred? It's not for what he has done. It's because they don't want him to do what he has to do to save this nation. And who owns MSNBC? Who owns CNN? Robber barons. If you trace the ownership of these media conglomerates all the way up to the top, to the board of directors, and you look at the interlocking boards that they sit on, you think they only sit on Time Warner? Or do you think they only sit on News Corporation? They sit on the boards of companies you never heard of. And they're all interlocking corporate directorships, which the left used to know about back in the 60s when they were still a rational left wing, when there was still a rational Democratic left wing in this country. Right now, there is no Democratic left wing left in this nation, so far as I can tell. I never see or read anything by them that makes any sense. But because of this interlocking group of board of directors, you're never going to see Facebook or Google or any of these other companies ever be broken up or pay their fair share of taxes. Never. That's because they keep you off base by inciting the lower classes in violence against you. This is the way the game is played. If you want a cryptic overview of what's happening, I just gave it to you. Okay, so I'm giving you the arc of where this country goes. It's a long, graduate school course from the Savage School of Graduate Studies. And where it goes next is where it's anyone's guess. Do we go down the road of Venezuela is the question. Now that we are in the throes of a communist or socialist revolution in the United States of America, fomented in great part by Barry Obama, one of the most clever, I got to give it to him, he is one of the most clever communists I've ever seen in my life. Never once did he yell. Never once did he lose his temper. Never once did he ever sound violent. But underneath the calm, cool surface of that con man was a revolutionary of the likes of Che Guevara combined with Karl Marx. And to show you what a fraud he is, he just got a $70 million advance for 2 books from him and his wife, yet to be written. He bought another house for $8.1 million. And on vacation, he's been going from one billionaire's island to another, flying on one billionaire's jet after another. This is how the rich do it. Not like the rich you know. The rich that you know are not like them. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? Most of the rich people you know got it through very hard work and got it through decency. But those who do it illegally through government contracts and schemes and scams, the global warmists, the fake solar companies in the middle of the desert, things like that, they don't do it in the honest way. They're not going to be hurt very much by what happens. They are largely immune to the social upheaval that they have caused. And they will remain largely immune to the social upheaval that they have caused. The poor are not immune to the social upheaval because once they crush the middle class, once they destroy the middle class, the poor start starving. And once the starvation begins, that is when everything falls apart, as is happening right now, as I said to you, in Venezuela. Now, can that happen here? I don't know if it will happen here, but I know that we have the road to Venezuela in this country. The very same forces are in play. The very same rhetoric is in play. And the very same players are in play, only they're speaking in English, not in Spanish. I'll be right back.
Join the Savage Nation.